This is Sue Watkins, the Climate Change Program Manager with the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals at Northern Arizona University. Thank you for joining the webinar. This webinar will provide an overview of the Bureau of Indian Affairs Climate Change Award process. The webinar is being offered by the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals and the BIA. This webinar is being recorded, and we plan to post the webinar recording on ITEP's Climate Change Webinars webpage. The presentation is also available right now as a PDF you can download from the panel on the right side of your screen. You go down to handouts and you can get it there. If you have any questions, please type your questions into the question box on the right side of your screen. And after the presentation, the presenters will address the questions. And following the webinar, you'll receive a link to a short online evaluation form. Please take a few minutes to provide feedback and suggestions of topics for future webinars. And today's presenters are Sean Hart from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. He's the Climate Change Coordinator, and Rachel Novak, also with the BIA, who is the Climate Science Coordinator. You can contact me at ITEP. Here's my contact information. Our program offers climate change trainings, webinars, a tribal climate change newsletter, and the Tribes and Climate Change website, and much more. I encourage you to visit our program website at the URL listed on the slide, and please feel free to contact me if you have any questions about ITEP. I'm very pleased to have both Sean and Rachel with us for the webinar, and with that, let's turn controls over to them.
All right. Thank you very much, Sue. This is Rachel Novak. As she said, I'm the BIA Climate Science Coordinator. I hope everyone can hear me all right. Sue or Nikki, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, you sound fine.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thanks. Thank you for joining us today. I wanted to just let everyone know, since some of you probably joined us on the October 20th webinar, that the schedule has been delayed a bit, and so this is basically the same presentation that we gave then. So for those of you that were expecting something different, this will basically be the same, just because we had some delays, and the announcement is down with our attorneys right now for vetting, but we still do expect it to be released very soon. So just wanted folks to know that, in case they were on the 20th webinar, that this will be the same information. With that, I'll get started. So thanks for joining us today. We are basically the BIA Tribal Climate Resilience Program, and this part of this initiative is to provide managers on the ground with data and tools to consider climate change in planning and project design. So the kind of big focus there is providing the tools and in planning to help with that, rather than actual projects on the ground. We want to help managers on the ground, but this is really focused on the planning part of that, give them the tools that they need to incorporate climate change into their programs. So the funding is for training, strategic planning, helping to acquire data that can help with decision making, travel support, as well as a youth component. Okay, so like I said, the core of this initiative is the adaptation planning and the tools needed to implement that adaptation. So we have 8 million. We had 8 million in 2015. I expect to have about the same this year, to focus on federal coordination, strategic planning, vulnerability assessments, and supplemental monitoring, as well as travel support, and that 1 million for youth as a cross-cut. And that supplemental monitoring. Supplemental, meaning that it does not support, it's not meant to support your base program. It's meant to help identify climate-related indicators or whatnot, or maybe changes in cycles that could help inform your programs in ways that can help make climate-related decision points or help with decisions related more to climate. So that's kind of the difference between supplemental monitoring, or what we mean when we say supplemental monitoring versus your base program. Okay. We also have funding for ocean and coastal management planning. That's separate than the previous climate adaptation planning funding that I just mentioned. It's still for planning and for travel support. It doesn't necessarily have to be related to climate, though. It does not have to be related to climate. It may, but it does not have to be. So we have funding to support that as well. So incorporating climate change, you know, what is your process? What awards is the tribe support? What parts are the operational programs responsibility, et cetera? This is all built around trying to increase tribal capacity. So the funding is really to help incorporate climate change into your program. So you know, starting with strategic planning, and then having that feed into detailed vulnerability assessments, so you can identify where your programs are vulnerable to climate change. And then having that information really feed into, you know, how your programmatic plans could change so that your programs are more resilient. And then with that, you know, using resources that you already have in those programs to help implement those programmatic changes. And from there, monitoring, reevaluation, and then the cycle goes on. And this is really what the funding is supposed to try to support, really building tribal capacity through that, the planning, vulnerability assessments, you know, some of the supplemental monitoring I mentioned, and the tools, the data, and the training that can help in all of these components of building tribal capacity. So, and we've had a few cycles already, FY13-14 that focus still on training, strategic planning, capacity building, vulnerability assessments, and supplemental monitoring. And then in FY15, we maintained those funding categories, but we also added technical support, national training, GIS, and digital tools, which are soon to be online. And then in FY16, we expect to maintain the same tribal funding categories, but we're also going to be adding tribal climate science liaisons that we expect to come on in spring of 2016. And that's in coordination with USGS climate science centers. So if we get the funding we expect, we do expect to expand to vulnerability assessments to really support those and add programmatic level planning. Okay, so we have funding for technical support versus the funding opportunities that come in the support in the form of tribal awards. So on the technical support side, we have support for web tools that are really supposed to help with increasing decision support. We have GIS tech support that many of you might know already, who's very busy and who's getting some great tools ready to let folks know more about pretty soon as well. Like I mentioned, we are working with USGS climate science centers and have an MOU with them. That is to work with organizations to help really get tribal science needs addressed through kind of an extension form, as well as focusing on some of those research questions that can really help tribes adapt their programs to incorporate climate change. That support also helps with our staff here in DC and training on the national side, including our work with ITEP that's helping us today. And it also supports our membership in the Cooperative Ecosystem Studies Unit, the CESU. That's a great mechanism that we have to help answer tribal climate-related questions at a discounted rate, and it's a mechanism that we can use, and our partners here at the federal level can use as well. So, and that BIA regional folks can use if tribes do request help through that to identify some climate-related questions that could be addressed through the academic system that the CESU memberships helps us access. On the tribal awards side, we have 7 million. We had 7 million in 2015, and like I said, we expect to have similar levels for this round. And that's to help with climate adaptation support planning, vulnerability assessments, training, travel support, like I mentioned previously. And also funds to help with the ocean and coastal planning, and that 1 million for supporting our youth. Okay, so our funding history has grown. In FY13, you can see we had 640K awarded, and then it increased to 2.5 million and allowed us to double the number of awards that we were able to give out. And then in FY15, it increased quite a bit beyond that, and received quite a few more proposals and helped with in those 3 categories. And that is including some of the FY14-15 funds as well that came a little bit later than anticipated. So that 13.5 million includes that 4 million. So yeah, so last time we went in those 3 categories, or we funded those 3 categories, proposals in those. So ocean and coastal adaptation, general planning, and the youth cross-cut. So it's a good message. That we've been seeing this increase in support over the last 3 cycles. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of these categories of funding that we have. So I've spoken quite a bit about the climate adaptation planning categories already. So that goes to help support training to help your staff get some of that expertise to help them incorporate climate into your programs, and well, to help set up those trainings. And then there's travel support in addition to that in a different category, so that if there's not training in your area, you can send folks to go and receive that training where it is available. We have strategic-wide tribal climate adaptation planning as well. And vulnerability assessment and monitoring, and like I mentioned before, that is limited to supplemental monitoring rather than additions to your base program. So that is general information on that category. And then, like I mentioned before, we have that ocean and coastal management planning. It doesn't have to be focused on climate. It very well could be related, but it doesn't have to be focused on that. And that, similarly to the previous categories, focuses on planning, training, and vulnerability assessments. There's some limited funding on the monitoring side, and also travel support. And there is priority for the regional planning bodies. Okay, and like I mentioned before, we have that cross-cut for supporting our youth, and we have done that through providing awards for internships and for research, as well as in engagement for students. So that is available as a category as well. So on the program side, it can be multiple options, like really helping to incorporate into management decisions climate, and on the research side, like it says, basically helping students really get involved in some hands-on research, understand better, bring that back home, how you can address research questions related to climate change and how it could be impacting your programs. So we have our evaluation criteria, and these are things that we're thinking about as we go through the proposals. some of the things that we look for that can help us with the ranking is cooperation with other tribes, with the planning. So is it incorporating all the programs in the tribe or multiple tribes in the same area? Leveraging of funds as well. There's other partners out there that have expertise and resources that can be drawn from, and so those can be really helpful and advantageous in your proposals as well. And then, does it help support the skills gained by tribal staff during the planning process? And that's especially like thinking about training and travel, that side of things. And if your tribe is designated a climate champion, and so far there are 2 tribes that are designated climate champions. It was an initiative from the White House that the DOE has implemented. So hopefully that will go through another round and we'll have some more climate champions. So in addition to that, the adult education experience, leveraging skills from a partner, so reaching out and trying to identify other partners that can help increase training opportunities for your staff. Right. Okay, so for the last round we had a little over 25 reviewers. As they looked through them, they will look to see if it fits climate change and the categories as it's discussed in the announcement. So we'll look at overall quality and look for supplemental points for if there's cooperation with other partners and leveraging of funds and expertise and at the tribal staff doing the work. So basically we'll rank them from top to bottom and fund until the funds are expended. And the low-cost travel support for the climate sessions. Let's see. Yeah, and that gets funded almost every time. Okay, continuing with evaluation criteria. We are thinking about ways to help increase the capacity of small tribes and small and low capacity tribes. So we're trying to think of ways to help increase that. We realize not everyone has access to grant writers, and are trying to think about ways to help include those tribes so they can access those resources. So we are aware of that and trying to make some help encourage that through some of our criteria and our categories. So we aren't completely, well, we're having our 2016 criteria reviewed right now from our attorneys, and so we are, that will come out in the announcement. Those are not quite finalized at this point. Tribal resolutions are a requirement, however. So if a tribal college or the organization doesn't have 638, then they need to have a tribe take the funds and use them as a pass-through. And if additional time is needed to obtain that tribal resolution, we do understand that. So that would just be something that would need to be addressed in the proposal, and we can allow some extra time for that. I believe that's 30 days we allow beyond the deadline for the proposals. And yeah, we need to be put early. We need to get an email because the proposals that we are requesting are electronic. So within that email, just make sure that if you need extra time for that you let us know early in that email so we catch that and can give you that extra time you need. So once again, we expect to announce in a few weeks. We expect to get the same funding as 2015. we'll give 90 days to develop proposals, and like I mentioned before, there's going to be a 30-day extension if you need it to get your tribal resolution. We need the proposals electronically as well because our mail goes through an irradiation process because of the anthrax issue a few years ago. So that we will need those electronically. And all the categories are going to have the same deadline. So we can still answer questions since, like I mentioned, our process has been a little delayed and the announcement isn't out yet. Yeah, we can take questions at this point. Thanks, everyone, and yeah, we're looking forward to seeing your proposals.
Thank you, Rachel. This is Sue. There have been some questions that have been typed in, and I will read them off to you for you to answer. Could you talk a bit more about the science liaisons that are included in 2016 funding?
Sure. Can you hear me okay? I put myself on speaker.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, that is not part of this award cycle. I hope I didn't confuse anyone there. I was just talking about our program in general more and what support we have. But yeah, I can still talk about that. So we are going to be looking probably to tribal organizations, and we are a little delayed in this process still. So nothing's been finalized, but we are going to look for tribal organizations that can help us in this process of identifying and selecting these folks. And we'll be working with USGS, the Climate Science Centers. There are 7 that we are looking to work with, 5 to 7 that we're looking to work with, depending on funding availability. And they will be working in more of an extension capacity to tribes, so specifically are devoted to really 70-ish% of their time is really devoted to helping tribes address some of their climate questions, help them get access to data, help them generally get access to tools that are out there that can help them incorporate climate into their programs. And part of their time is also going to be focused on research questions that are relevant to the tribes, and really addressing those and bringing those to the research prioritization table with the other researchers at the Climate Science Centers, which are housed at different universities, depending on which Climate Science Center we're talking about. So, like in the Northwest, it's centered at the Oregon State University, but there are partner universities as well that are part of the research and kind of extension activities there. And then part of the time could be focused on helping that tribal organization with their membership and some of the climate needs that they have questions about and need assistance addressing. So that's generally kind of what we are hoping that these liaisons will help with. Additionally, you know, we're kind of seeing them as kind of transcultural, you know, boundary straddlers. So if there's specific questions that have more of a sensitive nature to them, you know, especially those that might involve like traditional knowledge that the tribes don't want shared, you know, and they want kept within the tribe and protected. That's something that we expect these liaisons to help with and be sensitive to, and still working to address climate adaptation needs. Does that answer? Is that okay?
Thank you. The next question is, please talk about what a vulnerability assessment is. And Rachel, if you could speak a little louder, that would be helpful.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go back.
Okay. Okay, is that better?
Yes, that's a lot better.
Okay, I picked the headset back up. Yeah, vulnerability assessments. There are many different kinds, but you know, if you identify, they're basically meant to identify specific vulnerabilities in programs. It can be more specific to like a specific component of your program, and usually if you look through documents like Scanning the Conservation Horizon from the National Wildlife Federation and federal partners that also greatly contributed to that, you can see different examples of those that's online, and they usually look through and identify what the exposure variables are, the climate exposure variables. So maybe like expected changes in precipitation and temperature, generally, or snowpack, or what kind of the main climate drivers are that might be changing, and how those exposure variables combine with sensitivity of your program or of a specific resource, whatever the assessment is focused on, to basically identify what the overall vulnerability of your program or a specific ecosystem you might be focused on, what those vulnerabilities are. And it'll also, they usually will identify what some of the adaptation capacity is of your ecosystem or your species or your program even, and how you could identify places to build adaptation capacity, maybe through management practices. If you're talking about like an ecosystem, maybe looking at more drought-tolerant species or whatnot. It just really depends on the context, what you're trying to, what system you're working in, if it's like a programmatic system or if it's like a natural resource system. So you can see, you can use vulnerability assessments in different contexts, but that's generally what they look at. They'll look at what the exposure is, how the climate could be changing, and how that impacts the sensitive components of whatever you're studying, your program, your ecosystem, species, what have you, and then looks at your adaptive capacity as well. So those are usually the three main components of vulnerability assessments.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, if a Navajo Nation entity receives funding for climate adaptation planning, does that mean another Navajo Nation entity cannot apply for the same funds?
No, different programs can apply for the funding within the same tribe. So that's, yeah, it just needs to be for a different project. So it's not limited, one proposal per tribe. It just is one proposal per project. And we have those three main categories. Good question. No.
Okay, thank you. Is the funding the same as the cooperative landscape funding from last year or different? Do you have a link or other, oh, that was that question. Is the funding the same as the funding from last year or different?
So the funding is we're expecting the same amounts. Is the question about the amounts or the source, the title? Oh yes, if it's the title, it is the same. We just modified the name. So sorry if that caused some confusion. Yeah, tribal climate resilience now.
The next question is, do you have a link or other reference on which tribes currently hold the Climate Champion designation?
That would be Blue Lake and Sault Ste. Marie.
Okay, and the next question, do you mean proposals are due via email or grants.gov?
Could you repeat the question?
Are proposals due by email or grants.gov?
They're due by grant or by email to a special address box we'll have in the announcement. Grants.gov is for general grants that go out to anybody, any government. And the reason we didn't go that way is because tribes do 638. They have their own 638 contracting law that gives tribes special status. And so the funding goes through that. And so we don't want the whole world to think that they can apply, only tribes can apply. So that's why It's not on grants.gov. So if your grant writer thinks it's on, that's the place to look, it's not there. It's going to be in the announcement that goes to the tribal leader and that we email out from our BIA Climate News. And then it gets sent to your proposal gets sent by the due date, anytime up to midnight, any time zone that day to our email address. You can send a hard copy, but like Rachel said, those copies get irradiated for anthrax, and so they get melted, and then we can't separate the pages, and they don't scan, and it's just a problem. So we really need them by email. Sorry to go on and on about that, but the melted ones are really tough to deal with.
Yeah. Okay, the next question. If we have been awarded a grant for Category 1, can we apply for a grant for Category 3 this year?
Yes.
Okay, the answer was yes. Okay. The next one, thank you for including the small tribes and acknowledging them for this grant. If you can send us information early enough, it will be part of the environmental staff school to write a proposal. So that was more
Great.
of a comment.
Excellent. So we're hoping.
The next question, if a tribe has not done a strategic plan or a vulnerability assessment, can they apply for supplementary monitoring?
Yes, yeah, they can still apply for that.
So the one thing to think about with that, and this is what Rachel said, was if your program didn't get enough money to do baseline monitoring for the whole program, climate change program can't support every tribal program that needs more data, even though climate's going to change everybody's baseline. So you want to really put a special effort into identifying how that extra information you're going to gather, this supplemental information, is going to help managers make decisions on how to change projects, so implement climate adaptation management decisions. So that's the key with, if we stick in monitoring, everybody's got monitoring, and there's not enough money to fund that. So that's the key for your being successful in that category is how is it going to help a decision maker make a decision on, adaptation or identification of, when people should eat shellfish or not. That's something that got funded in the past. So that's key right there.
The next question is, will the presentation be available to print out? And I can answer that. Yes, it's available right now on ITEP's Climate Change Webinars archive webpage. And also, you can download the presentation from this webinar right now. Click on the handouts plus sign, and you should be able to see a PDF, BIA Climate Change Funding Overview, and you can download that and print it off. The next, go ahead.
Sue, before you go on, I just want to say for everybody who downloads, if you add up all the numbers in the slides for what awards were, just remember that we had 14 money left over that carried over into 15 that we awarded in 15. So we have a $10 million program, but any place things add up to more than 10 million, we didn't invent money. So just remember that we had some carryover. Going forward, it depends on what Congress sends, but if we, get 10 million again, all the awards and all our technical support add up to 10 million. So if you download it and bring it to Tribal Council, things are not going to add up to 10 on every slide because of our carryover money. So if you're showing that stuff around, just remember that.
Okay, the next one's long, a couple parts to it. How is receiving funding for training grants connected to receiving funding for adaptation planning and or vulnerability assessments? Does BIA strategically connect these two sources of funding? And does a larger framework or vision and or goals for climate change in tribal communities exist?
So there's a category that says training, and that's design and deliver for tribes to identify. So originally that was to increase tribal capacity to become players in the climate training world, you know, because there's definitely a need out there. If anybody goes online looking for training, you know, there's a lot that's missing. So that's what that was originally designed for. What the way the awards have been coming in lately, or proposals have been coming in lately, is as what I would call regional training, or a bunch of tribes get together for a certain specific kind of training. That's been a more popular award than a national one. So Rosebud and some cooperators, they got a national award. They haven't produced it yet, but they're going to do webinars. So that's sort of was the original intent. That was in 14, or the 14 funding. So that's national, but mostly lately it's been regional. So that's what that's designed for. And then ITEP is sort of that national in-person, you know, known quantity training coming to your region. So those are the two pieces of, once the tribal generated ideas that, you know, we need to train on these things with these cooperators for this audience. And then ITEP is that strategic adaptation planning coming to your area soon kind of training piece. And I think I talked so much I forgot the whole question. Did I miss any part, Sue?
Let's see. The last part was, and does a larger framework or vision and or goals for climate change in tribal communities exist?
So we do have a vision. There's a bunch of federal partners and tribal partners that work together trying to identify gaps. The Southern Climate Science Center is working on the same sort of thing, you know, get a big vision, see where gaps are, fill those in. But with the tribal proposals, if they're tribal generated, we take what we get. So the highest quality that produces something for their audience, whether it's regional or national, those are funded, well, they're ranked and then funded down. So they don't necessarily always put into the vision, but they're tribal input and, you know, they're tribal supported. So yeah, there's two pieces going on. We're trying to find the gaps and fill those and make sure there's training for all levels. But then there's training that comes in from the tribes that says, we want to have this for our region for sort of Climate 101 boot camp. And so that's part of the vision, but them doing it isn't part of our big vision. So it's sort of both of those are true. And we don't always use the tribal awards as part of the gap on, you know, filling in a hole. It's who comes to the table.
Okay, the next question, when is the application coming out? I guess the RFP coming out?
We have high hopes that it will smoothly go through our leadership and lawyers and the wordsmithers, but we don't know. So we're hoping it's in the next couple weeks. I've never been on time, and when my hopes, you know, and when I hoped it would come out and it actually showed up. So I'm embarrassed to say that, but soon.
Okay, okay, soon. The next question, with regard to proposed evaluation criteria, you note the question of how to get capacity to a tribe that doesn't have capacity to write a proposal. Have you come to any conclusions with regard to how to accomplish this through award criteria?
Yes, we have come to a conclusion, but that's the part where we say, you know, wait until our lawyers and our leadership. So there's a lot of times, and I can say the last couple of years, when I would write some criteria to do, you know, to reach some kind of goal, and it's like this, but not this exact example, and then the lawyers don't read it the same as I read it, and so they take it out. So we have a proposal up, and And if it makes it through, you'll see it in the announcement. If it gets reworded, it'll be different than exactly what I've written. I'll give you an example. So we like the idea of tribes using our cooperative ecosystem services unit membership to get a discount rate. So if a tribe works together with a university that they, trusted university or tribal college to do a vulnerability assessment, if the tribe did it, if we sent the money to the tribe, they added their 5% indirect pass-through, they sent the university charged 26% indirect. We're paying 30% indirect. But we have a vision of tribes being able to write a strong proposal with a partner that's a member of the CSU, university or tribal college, and saying we want the BIA to use that mechanism. Now, whether or not that gets through our legal department and our contracting department and all that is a whole different question. So, but that's the sort of thing where we hope to do these types of things, but until you see the announcement, it's not written in stone, it's not legal, it's not a commitment. So, between us, we have this goal, and sometimes reality gets in the way.
Okay, here's another question, again from the Navajo Nation. There are 3 sections to the climate change funding. If a Navajo Nation entity applies to the Category 1 funding this year, can another Navajo Nation entity apply for Category 1 funding this coming year? So 2 different entities within the tribe applying for the same category. Is that possible?
It is possible. They would have to be different projects. So you can't say, there's a limit for youth funding. I forgot what it was, but last year it was like $7,500 to $75,000. You can't say, well, we're going to do, our program is going to be $150. So if Navajo Natural Resources applies for one and Navajo Roads Department applies for the other half, we'll combine them and do one thing. But if they're separate projects, yeah, they can apply. And I would say, you got to really shine on, you don't want the same partners. There was a project for an ocean coastal where the tribe had 2 similar things, but the one set of partners that information was going to go to and leverage resources and restoration ideas and stuff was different than another project and set of partners. So they were not only able to leverage those other partners, but they were able to, those benefits were replicated not only in Indian country, but onto non-Indian lands, formerly Indian lands. So,
okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that leads into the next question, but do you have anything more to say about this one?
No, it's just if you're going to do something like that, if a lot of tribes are so big, people don't know what else is getting applied for. But if you're going to do something like that, you really want to make it clear. You got to do a good job in your writing so it shows that there's benefits that go beyond. It's got to rank up there pretty good.
Okay, so the next question was, can you provide more information on the leveraging of funds?
Right, so this comes down to, it was created back when, geez, I'm not letting Rachel answer anything, am I? She got her piece in. So it came down to when we didn't have any money. So, we had $640,000 for all of Indian country and Alaska Natives. So making sure we got some other partner at the table, it's not requirement, but you got points for it. So having somebody else make a contribution, whether it's in kind, it's time, all those things said, we stretched our dollars. Well, every year except for the youth ones last year, which had too short a timeline to write, we're oversubscribed. People ask for more money than there is. So leverage still says we need to stretch our dollar. So the weak point of that is some tribes are leveraging in-kind contributions. So they hire, say, strategic planning. They've got a coordinator that's in the grant, and then all the staff time for that strategic plan isn't included, and so they don't get the points. So that'd be something that I recommend that tribes do. If you're going to have staff time, that's a contribution, or some tribes have contributed the indirect, and they put it down as a dollar amount, and that's real money that the tribe's kicking in. So, you know, if you're going to do that, put it down and get the leverage points. Don't leave them on the table. Oh, I should mention before we go on, this question's come up a lot in the past, but we don't care if the matching, you know, some other federal agencies say you can't use federal funds to match. That's not the case with these. We just, you know, we'll take anybody's money. So if it's 638 funds from another BIA program, if it's 638 funds from IHS, all those are the same. It's in-kind, time, tribal indirect, leverage, you know, other federal money. That's all matched us.
Okay, the next one. Please elaborate on what strategic adaptation planning should entail.
Okay. Did I write this question?
No.
Because this is sort of where I live. So if I think about how you get an organization to move, how are you going to get those managers on the ground to actually consider it? Because they say, you know, my plate's full of tons of other stuff, and now I have to become a climate scientist to figure out what to need to do. Well, there's a couple things they need, which is leadership intent that this is important, and they need other people around them to say, you know, we're moving forward. So, you know, think about that office environment. You sort of need everybody to move in the same direction. And then tribal leadership needs the same thing. They need to signal sometimes when it's adopting a new thing, a new emphasis. They need to signal that that's important. So that's the tribal resolution, but it's also strategic planning, where you get all the programs around the table and you say, we're going to move forward on this. And then the outcome of that is everybody starts with a common, they get a common language, a common view of what the issues are. They realize what the priorities are for the tribal leadership, but also in climate. So as you look at the information that's available, and strategic planning is done usually before vulnerability assessments or the detailed vulnerability assessments are available. So you're looking at what information is available in general, and then you're saying, where do we need more information? So all these things are identified in strategic planning. So that's the signal for leadership to start. All the programs are on the table. It's also a signal to leadership if the program writes 2 paragraphs and another one writes, 17 pages. That maybe the 17-pager, maybe they've got a good vision of where they go. They know what new information they need. They know what vulnerability assessments they need to invest in or ask for an award for. So that helps leadership, put the spurs to the programs that are slow to adopt. So that's what strategic adaptation planning is. It sets the goal. It says where identifies where your gaps are, where you're going to need more information. It maybe sets a timeline for where the programmatic plans need to be updated. We don't fund programmatic plans. Strategic plans and vulnerability assessments, that cross broad program areas and cross tribal boundaries and ecosystem boundaries. That's the sort of stuff we fund to provide managers tools. Programmatically, once you have those tools, you should be able to look at what those suite of management choices are that the tribe accepts. The BIA programs may provide funding for those. So forestry, water, wildlife has some funding in those departments. But did I miss anything? So I think I sort of blasted that one, but if anybody has more detailed questions, yeah, that's what you can look online for strategic plans. The gold standards is Swinomish is online, but theirs went sort of beyond it. They went to the program level and said what their next steps are. They added other pieces later. As PERS has one. Sue, your program has a list of where they are, correct?
Yes.
So So there's some examples out there. The other thing I'd say for people who are listening, and we've heard this on conference calls before, is everybody who wrote a programmatic plan stalled out at some point. And that's just the nature of working in a big office, tribal organization is, there's going to be challenges. And looking at the other plans, talking to the tribes that have planned before, can help you through these tough times. But know that everybody's going to have their own challenges. But you still can get through it and come out with a document that helps those programs move ahead and gather, identify what information they have and, tell them where to go. We're all pretty sure that strategic plans generally are put on the shelf afterwards. I mean, Swinamish's isn't because they have their goals written out for work goals. But in general, once you've done the exercise, it's not opened up a lot unless you're lost and you're checking on things. So it's a big investment, gets everybody rolling, identifies what you have and what you need, and then you move on from there.
Okay, another question. Is IGAP one of the joint federal partners that we can base our proposal on for climate change?
So we've talked to them, and strategic planning, yes, we both are in agreement that that's a goal. And so IGAP has some other requirements like you have to do, and I'm out of my league here, but if you're doing a project or implementation, you have to fit their goals. But strategic planning for climate adaptation, they have written into their guidelines that it's fine. It's it's even though it covers other programs, BIA is the same way. So yes, you can match IGAP. If the IGAP person is funded to do the coordination work, for example, a strategic adaptation plan, all the rest of the funding can come out of the BIA side, and that'd be a match. We'd count that. So yes, they're a partner.
Okay, another question. Was it, let's see, what is the time period in which the funds need to be spent? For example, end of 2016 or 2017?
So write out the time period that you need for the project. There's a legal question that we're still checking with the lawyers. We get 2-year funds. So in 16, we're talking about 16 FY16 money. It can actually, the Congress has authorized it for past. It's 16 and 17. So fiscal year. So for sure it can go until October 2017, but usually when it goes into a 638 contract, there's a little more time for that. Now, in the past, when we had a lot of competition, some tribes wrote down, they had a 2-year project and they broke it into years, so that if they were on the bubble, right on the edge of funding, and we wouldn't have enough to fund 2 years, we could fund 1, and we did that with in a couple instances. So if you were to be strategic about it and you had a multi-year project, highlight that it's a multi-year project, but then say, write down the tribe will accept 1-year funding because you can apply the next year, unless it'll destroy, unless the program won't work. And that gives us, the chances are low that you'd be on that bubble. But if it is, you want to have already given us the license to fund you, even if it's a partial.
The next question is regarding the youth intern funding. If a tribe is awarded, can funds be used to purchase computers for the interns due to limited tribal resources for the youth?
Yes, we usually, so buying equipment makes reviewers look closer at everything you write. So this is sort of an inside baseball thing. So I'll do the extreme example. We're going to have a summer youth intern. I'm buying a pickup truck to drive them around. We would look at that and say, it looks to me like they're buying a pickup truck and they're going to make up a work plan for somebody so they can buy a truck. So if you really need it and you've got a good description for it and it's part of the whole, it's a lockdown package, yes, you can add that equipment, but it's sort of like telling the IRS at the end of the year, that you had a home office. It's sort of a red flag that causes them to look really close at what you're doing. So just from talking about past reviewing, I don't know what the future will hold. If you're going to write that down, then do a good job in justifying how you're doing that.
And this person did add a comment, the computers will be given to the youth interns at the end of the project.
Oh, that's scary. So our federal funding is going to buy computers for people who are not tribal staff, and they're going to use it later. That one we would probably walk down to the lawyers and say, are we allowed to? So it wouldn't change. We'd still evaluate it, and we couldn't do this for every single grant, but when we get to some cost that's potentially not allowable, we have to go talk to contracting, we have to go talk to the lawyers about that. So the idea that, the same thing, if I go back to the pickup truck example, we're going to give the kids the car at the end of the year. We can all imagine that we would be in jail at the end of that event. So the computer part, we'd have to talk to our lawyers. If the person is thinking about that, talk to your tribal solicitor or, tribal lawyer and see if the tribe's able to do that through a scholarship program or something. That one's a tough one.
Okay. The next question, will this Q&A session be available for reference later? I'll answer that. We are recording this webinar right now, including the Q&A session. We will make the recording available on ITAP's webinars, archived climate change webinars webpage. It may take a week or so for the recording to be posted. And the next question is, will this PowerPoint be emailed to the participants? No, we have it already available on that archived webinars climate change webpage. It's also available right now. If you go to the panel on the right and click on the cross next to handouts, you'll see a red PDF sign, BIA Climate Change Funding Overview. That is this presentation. You can download it right now if you want. The next question, and I think this is the last question we have, unless someone else types in something in the next moment or two. What if your FY15 award was written to run 24 months, but was completed in 12? Are you eligible to apply for FY16, building off of FY15 deliverables?
Yeah, congratulations on getting things done faster than you planned. Yeah, so you can build on things. You might want, I don't know if this would change the quality of your project, but you might want to show the foundation that you started with. Saying that was BIA award funding, I don't think it should really change. It shouldn't change on how you rank. It's the quality of the proposal you have going forward. It might tell the reviewers that you have a history of success, that you really aren't able to judge time. No, I'm just kidding about that. No, it doesn't restrict you, and congratulations on knocking it out.
And we have a few more questions that just got typed in. Will this information also be at the BIA Providers Conference in Anchorage this year?
So there's a regional point of contact, but I don't know that if he set up a presentation, he hasn't asked us for one. So we're not scheduled to go up there. We could probably send him information so he could answer some of these questions, but the real subtle ones that I stumbled on, he definitely won't be able to answer.
Okay, another question, is this a competitive grant or does every tribe have a chance at getting some funding?
It's competitive project-based funding, so So yes, they're all ranked. That's why we talked about ranking criteria. You need to write a nice proposal. If it was base funding, it'd be formula and it would have already gone out. But the tribes told the White House that they had needs for climate to identify data and tools and make adaptation planning decisions. The White House provided this amount of funding. It's actually more than the tribes asked for in 2010. So, but it came down and said, you know, it's got to go out to tribes and not just get sent out as a formula for, you know, $1,000 for every tribe, and what can you do with that? So that's why it's part of this larger structure. You know, there's data and tools for managers, there's training, there's tribal lead design training, and then these strategic planning vulnerability assessments. So it's not formula-based. It doesn't go out automatically. You got to request it, and you got to show that you have a good vision for what it's doing and how it's going to help the tribe do climate adaptation on the ground ultimately. So some stuff is, you know, talking to elders about traditional ecological knowledge and gathering that information for a strategic plan ultimately helps the manager. It just takes a while.
Another question. Will there be any funds for tribes that are below 250 population?
We didn't define in our idea of small and needy the size. So some tribes, we sent money to villages last year, and I don't know what their population, but I think some of them are pretty small. Some rancherias, so there's no population requirement. There's not a set aside for that. We do have the capacity idea that we're working on. So that'd be the same thing. If you were a 250,000 or 250 person tribe, but were, you know, had a really good working casino and had enough money, you know, you should have the capacity to be able to write a grant versus a really big tribe that, you know, has a lot of challenges. So no, there isn't a set aside for size, but there will be for capacity. It's not a set aside, it's a category.
A couple more questions just came in. Is there a list of grants that you offer that pertain to this opportunity?
So past ones are on our website. Google BIA and climate change. That should get you to our website. Otherwise, you have to search in the BIA's, you know, inside our website. But if you get right to the climate change side, it shows what awards were done in the past, and it shows a little one-sentence synopsis of what the project was. Travel awards are just travel, but other than that.
And a question, can this grant be applied to our brownfield program as well? I heard a mentioning of IGAP earlier.
Right, so no, it's got to be climate specific. So if you have a climate challenge in the brownfields, you can either go, if that sounds like operations, it sounds like programmatic level. But if it's part of a strategic plan, you're going to get that tribal department together with others. Then yeah, it can be an element of, if you have a vulnerability assessment that you're going to do that, you'd be a lot more successful if you had other tribes that had the same challenges. You know, we all have this type of storage unit, or we have this type of brownfield. You know, our climate threats. It's hard for me to figure out how there'd be a universal climate threat when it's a site-specific challenge. But if you're really good at writing, you could maybe explain that to us and be successful.
Oh, another question. Let's see. Yes, an assessment approach or cooperative approach and how our contaminated sites list may be affected by the changes. So that was the same person who asked about the brownfield program.
Yeah, so if you're able to write that up, good luck. You know, you'd have to explain the climate connection, and that's true for everybody. Ocean and coastal isn't a climate connection, but it's ocean and coastal connected. So yeah, you have to do a good job of explaining why it's climate, and not just saying my program is, everybody's program is affected by climate. therefore I need programmatic dollars to deal with it. You got to say, what is the climate adaptation decision that we're trying to work on here? So strategic planning for everybody in the tribe, vulnerability assessments that would help not only your tribe but other tribes in similar impact zone sort of things. But programmatically, if you're getting down to your actual program and what you're going to do to implement, that's your program funds. That's not climate adaptation coordination funds.
Okay, that is it. I do not see any more questions. Hopefully I got all the ones that were typed in. Oh, actually, we just got another one, Sean.
Well,
Please.
we do have we have other calls we got to get on, so let's have this be the last one.
Okay, this will be the very last question. Otherwise, if you have questions, contact Sean by email, I guess. Please clarify what the 3 elements of a vulnerability assessment are.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah, this is Rachel. So generally the 3 elements are identifying your exposure, your sensitivity, and your adaptive capacity. And with those vulnerability assessments, also it's identifying what your management options are can be part of that adaptive capacity component. There are some really great examples, and that document I mentioned earlier, Scanning the Conservation Horizon, and it goes through those 3 main components of the vulnerability assessment.
Okay, thank you very much, and we're not taking any more questions now. Someone did write in, thank you very much. And I echo that, Sean and Rachel, thank you for giving the presentation and answering all the very many good questions that were asked. And we all will be looking forward to seeing the RFP come out hopefully within a few weeks.
So will we.
Yeah, and thank you everyone who joined the webinar. As I said, we will be posting the webinar recording on ITEP's Climate Change Webinars archive webpage. And with that, we are ending the webinar. Thank you and goodbye. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.